He kissed her on the forehead and said, "Thank you for saving my family." The next morning he was gone. No note, no goodbye, just silence and a call from his mother laughing. "Now that you're broke, let's see who wants you." But what they didn't know, Liana had just started keeping the receipts. Liana Torres had always been the dependable one. The quiet girl with the color-coded spreadsheets and rainy day fund, the type of woman who remembered everyone's birthday and never let her emotions get in the way of logic. 33, stylish in that clean, understated way, fitted cardigans, neat hair, and eyes that said, "I notice everything, even when I stay silent." She built her life brick by brick. No handouts, no shortcuts. Her career as an accountant wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. She freelanced on the side, kept her own books tight, and never once missed a rent payment, even back when she was earning less than minimum wage tutoring kids after college. When she married Daniel Rivera, he didn't come with a perfect past, but he came with sincerity, or so she thought. He was charming in a messy, boyish way, the kind of man who could make strangers laugh in checkout lines and convince you that life wasn't so serious. Liana thought they balanced each other out. He taught her to loosen up. She grounded him. And when his family's financial situation began crumbling beneath them, credit card debt, a foreclosure scare, his father's medical bills, she didn't hesitate. "I'll cover it," she said, her voice shaking slightly as she stared at the number on the final notice. $79,843.52. "You do that?" he asked, eyes wide, vulnerable. "There are family," she replied. She liquidated her savings, cashed out her Roth IRA early, and even put her side business on hold. For Daniel, for his parents, for the dream of being one family, whole and safe. And he'd kissed her hand, tears in his eyes, and said, "I'll never forget what you've done." But he did. Less than 24 hours later, Daniel was gone. No trace. No explanation. Just a quiet apartment and a voicemail from his number that said, "It's not you, Liana. It's me. I need to find myself. Don't call." Her knees buckled. Her vision blurred. She sat on the kitchen floor for hours, the checkbook still open on the table beside the receipt, the one that said paid in full in bright red ink. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst came 3 days later, when his mother, Rosa, called. Liana had expected heartbreak, confusion, maybe a sliver of sympathy. Instead, she heard laughter. "I guess you finally served your purpose," Rosa said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "That debt was suffocating us. You were useful. We thank you." Liana said nothing. Her silence was thick with disbelief. "But let's be real, Mija," Rosa added coldly. "You were never really family. You're just the girl who paid the bill." Click. Liana stared at the phone, her hand trembling. And for the first time in her life, her silence wasn't peacekeeping. It was rage. Quiet. Controlled. And sharpening. Liana didn't scream. She didn't call her friends. She didn't chase after Daniel. Instead, she did what she had always done in moments of disaster. She pulled out a pen, and she wrote everything down. Dates, amounts, transactions, the exact payment she wired to the debt consolidation company, the amounts she paid to cover Rosa's mortgage, the check for Daniel's father's back surgery, the emergency cash loan she gave to Daniel's unemployed cousin Luis. Every cent. $80,437.17, including the gas mileage she never charged for. And as she wrote, she didn't cry. She remembered. Every dismissive comment. Every fake thank you. Every time she'd been told she was too serious or too careful or too money-obsessed. They never knew she was protecting them from the very disaster they dragged behind them like luggage. And when she finally reached the bottom of her list, she signed her name at the bottom like a contract. This was my line. Never again. The next morning, she woke early. Not to make breakfast or send emails or check in with Daniel. She had calls to make. The first was to the freelance agency, where she did side gigs. "I'm back," she told the manager. "Double my load. And send me the clients no one else wants." The second was to her bank. She froze all joint accounts. Not that Daniel had left anything behind, but she wasn't about to take another hit. The third was to her landlord. If a man named Daniel Rivera tries to pick up my mail or enter the unit, deny him. And then she went shopping. Not for clothes. Not for wine and tears. She bought office supplies. Binders. Printer ink. Color-coded tabs. A second monitor. Because Liana wasn't just going to heal. She was going to rebuild smarter, stronger, and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. By the end of the first week, she had already earned $6,000. She took on nightmare clients, businesses that hadn't touched their books in years. She worked from 6 a.m. until midnight. Coffee, spreadsheets, client calls. She ran payrolls for people she'd never meet and untangled tax messes that would give most CPAs migraines. But with every hour she worked, something inside her clicked back into place. Her brain, her rhythm, her worth. She stopped waiting for an apology from Daniel. She started calculating something else. What would it take to get every dollar back with interest? Not from him. Not directly. But from the empire he'd used her to prop up. 2 weeks in, she did what she'd never dared before. She reached out to Rosa's sister, Aunt Maribel, the black sheep of the family, the one Rosa called toxic and jealous in every story. Maribel picked up on the third ring. "Liana," she said cautiously. "Yes," Liana replied. "And I need to ask you something privately." Maribel hesitated then. "Go on." "Did Daniel have this planned?" Liana asked. Did they all know I'd pay the debt and leave me dry?" Maribel was quiet. Then she sighed. "I warned him. I told him it was disgusting. But Rosa said, she's got the money and she's stupid in love. So yes, they knew. They all knew." Liana's throat tightened. Maribel continued, her voice sharp now. "But don't you dare think you're weak. You're the only one in that family who ever acted like a damn adult. You're worth 10 of them." Liana's grip on the phone softened. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've watched Rosa destroy too many good women. And this time, I want the good woman to win." And that's when the plan began. Not revenge. Restoration. She learned that Rosa's house, the one Liana had helped save from foreclosure, had a co-signer on the deed, Daniel. A co-signer who had now walked away from responsibility. Liana didn't want the house. But she did want what it represented, leverage. She called the bank. She filed a claim of hardship reimbursement due to fraudulent misrepresentation. With all her documentation and signed proof, she had a legitimate claim to pursue Daniel for civil restitution. But that wasn't all. Daniel's cousin Luis? The one she loaned $2,000 for urgent rent. He had opened a business with Daniel. It was small, sloppy, but real. A hookah lounge in a rundown plaza. And guess whose name was listed as the primary guarantor on the lease? Not Daniel. Liana. They'd used her credit, just temporarily, Daniel had said, for the paperwork. Now they owed her everything. By the end of week 4, Liana had served Daniel and Luis with a formal demand letter through her lawyer. She didn't expect a response. But she got one anyway, in the form of a phone call from Rosa. "You think this makes you powerful?" Rosa hissed. "Dragging our name through courts like you're some victim?" "I'm not a victim," Liana said coolly. "I'm a creditor." "You ungrateful brat. After all we did for you." "You mean after I paid off your debt, saved your house, helped your son, and you laughed when he left me?" Silence. "I'm not asking for payback," Liana added. "I'm collecting." Rosa's voice cracked. "You think anyone will marry you after this? You're poison. You're dried up. You're done." And that's when Liana smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then you better hope I stay done. Because if I'm just getting started, you'll really have something to cry about." She hung up. And this time she laughed. 2 days later, she opened her inbox to a formal settlement offer. Daniel wanted to avoid court. He was willing to transfer 60% of his share in the lounge to her, along with $10,000 in monthly payments for the next 3 years. She rejected it. Instead, she offered her own terms. 100% ownership of the lounge. His name removed from Rosa's mortgage. A public apology posted on his social media. And a written declaration forfeiting any right to future earnings from her name or business. Daniel didn't respond. But his lawyer did. She's not bluffing. Sign it. And he did. By the end of month 2, Liana owned the lounge, refinanced Rosa's house, and sold both at a profit. She donated half to a financial literacy fund for women stuck in abusive financial dynamics. The other half? She used it to launch a personal finance boot camp, online, affordable, no gatekeeping. Its name? The Receipt. Because now, she wasn't just keeping them. She was teaching women how to use them. Liana hadn't just won. She'd rewritten the rules. For years, she had played the role of the good woman. Generous, forgiving, quiet. She didn't ask for much. She supported her husband, showed up for his family, bit her tongue when Rosa made sly comments about her lower middle-class roots, and kept smiling even when her boundaries were trampled. But now, she was being called ruthless. The word didn't offend her. It comforted her. Because she finally understood that being ruthless didn't mean being cruel. It meant refusing to be eaten alive by people who mistook kindness for permission. Within 3 months of launching the Receipt, Liana's inbox was overflowing. Emails from women across the country, all echoing the same theme. I gave too much. They used me. I thought love meant sacrifice. She recognized herself in every line. And she wasn't just answering their emails, she was giving them tools, templates, legal referrals, budget spreadsheets, confidence. One woman wrote, I left my boyfriend of 4 years after watching your video about financial gaslighting. I didn't even know that was a real thing. Another shared, your story made me realize I don't have to stay in a marriage where I feel more like a wallet than a wife. Liana didn't just create a platform. She had sparked a movement. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was unraveling. Without Liana's credit, connections, and silent guidance, his business tanked in under 2 months. The hookah lounge, his big dream, was slapped with health violations, unpaid tax penalties, and bad Yelp reviews. Customers stopped coming. Suppliers refused credit. And the final nail? The city retracted the late-night license, which had been approved only because of Liana's spotless financial background. He called her one night. Unknown number. Her gut told her it was him. She answered anyway. Liana, he said. Please don't hang up. She didn't say a word. I know you don't owe me anything, he said quickly. I messed up. I thought you were holding me back, but you were the only thing holding me up. Still, she said nothing. I was stupid, he added. But I've changed. I've been seeing a counselor. I want to. Liana finally spoke. Daniel, stop. He went quiet. I don't need your apology, she said. I don't need your confession. And I definitely don't need to hear about your growth. What I need is distance. What I deserve is peace. I still love you, he said softly. You don't love me, she replied. You loved what I gave you. Then gently she hung up. No rage. No tears. Just closure. A week later, Rosa tried again too. This time, it wasn't through threats or guilt. It was an invitation to a family brunch. Liana almost laughed. The audacity. After everything. But curiosity won, and she showed up. Not out of softness. Out of power. She walked into the modest dining room of Rosa's house, the same house Liana once saved, and saw a table of cousins, aunts, and uncles. The chatter faded when she entered. Rosa's smile was forced, her eyes twitching with nerves. Liana, so glad you came. You said this was for family, Liana replied, folding her coat over the back of a chair. I wasn't sure I still counted. A few people cleared their throats. Others looked away. They all knew. Now. Knew she'd dismantled their scheme with precision. Knew she had taken their shame and turned it into strength. They didn't greet her like the help anymore. They greeted her like the storm. The brunch passed in tension. Polite conversation. Forks clinking. No one dared make a single snide remark. Not this time. But toward the end, Rosa spoke again. I heard about your project, she said, forcing a smile. The receipt. That's cute. Liana tilted her head. It's not cute. It's profitable. And powerful. I'm just saying, Rosa continued, airing family business online might make it hard to find a real husband. Most men don't want women who fight. Liana set her fork down. I don't want most men, she said calmly. And I'm not fighting. I'm building. Then she stood. I didn't come here to eat. I came to return something. She pulled a crisp white envelope from her purse and laid it on the table. It was the original title deed, the one with Rose's name and Daniel's still barely visible. Your house is clean now, Liana said. I've cleared your mortgage. You're welcome. Everyone gasped. And one more thing, she added, walking toward the door. Don't ever confuse my silence with weakness again. I'm not the woman who walked in here months ago. She left without another word. No tears. No performance. Just peace and a full spine of steel. The video of her Geneva speech went viral 6 days later. 1 million views. Then 2. The title was simple. When they use you, keep the receipt. A publisher reached out. A book deal followed. And for the first time, Liana walked into a bookstore and saw her name on the shelf. Liana Torres, not someone's wife. Not someone's fool. A woman who gave everything, was left with nothing, and came back with more than enough. The book hit the shelves 6 months after Liana handed back the deed. It wasn't flashy. No celebrity endorsements. No glittery cover with curled fonts. Just a plain white jacket with the title. The receipt. How to Reclaim Yourself After They Drain You. By Liana Torres. And beneath it, a subtitle that made hearts stop and hands reach for their wallets. They used me. I kept the receipts. And I built a life with interest. The book was personal. Brutally so. Each chapter told a story, not just hers, but the voices of dozens of women Liana had mentored through her platform. She told of the single mom whose partner drained her retirement, the immigrant daughter who paid for everyone's visas but was treated like the maid, the woman who funded her husband's dream only to be discarded when it succeeded. Liana didn't hide. She named what happened to her. She called it financial betrayal. She called it emotional debt. And she called it a theft of trust disguised as love. The book sold out its first print run in under 72 hours. She started receiving messages she never expected. Women thanking her, yes, but also men. I never realized how much I leaned on my wife until she broke, one wrote. You woke me up, said another. My sister gave you her last $10 when you launched the receipt. She says she doesn't regret it. Neither do I. She even got one anonymous note, handwritten, no return address. I left someone like Daniel. Your story gave me courage. I hope you never doubt how far your ripples reach. Liana read that one 3 times. Then she framed it on her office wall. Meanwhile, Daniel's face resurfaced, though not in the way he would have wanted. Someone forwarded Liana a video clip from a late-night podcast. The host, laughing, held up a blurry photo. Y'all remember that guy who ran off after his wife paid off his entire family's debt? Yeah. This is him now, trying to sell cigars out of his mom's basement. The audience howled. Liana didn't laugh. She didn't feel rage either. Just distance. Daniel had become a cautionary tale. But she wasn't interested in being the villain in his downfall story. She was too busy building her own. Her team at the receipt grew from 3 to 30. She opened an in-person training center in Austin, another in Atlanta, a hotline staffed by volunteer financial counselors. She created a scholarship program for women escaping financially abusive marriages. She partnered with a bank to offer starter credit lines under the Receipt brand. And still, through all the growth, all the headlines, she remained grounded. Her morning still began with oatmeal and client calls. She still answered emails herself when she could. She still refused expensive speaking fees unless half went to domestic support shelters. And yes, she still saved her receipts. Then one afternoon, Liana got a call that caught her off guard. A young woman, nervous, soft-spoken. Hi, I'm Camila. I think I think I'm your ex-husband's daughter. Liana sat up. I'm sorry, what? I mean, I'm not sure, the girl said quickly. He might be. My mom doesn't talk about it, but she said his name was Daniel Rivera. He left when she was pregnant. She said he was married later, to someone kind. She said you were the only good thing about him. Liana was silent. Camila took a shaky breath. I'm not asking for money. I just wanted to say thank you for what you built. I signed up for your mentorship last year. I didn't know who you were, not at first. You helped me get my first job. I just wanted to tell you, you made something beautiful out of something awful. Liana closed her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I'm glad you found us. And I'm glad you found you. Later that evening, Liana walked into her home, a minimalist mid-century house she had purchased in cash with her book advance. No shared names on the deed. No co-signers. Just her. She stood by the window, staring out at the garden she'd planted herself. Roses, sunflowers, jasmine, all things that bloomed after being cut. Damien, her legal counsel and now COO of the receipt, walked in behind her. You okay? He asked, setting down a mug of tea. I spoke to Daniel's daughter today, she said. His brows lifted. He has a daughter? Apparently. A teenager. Her name's Camila. Is she okay? She is now, Liana replied. She's part of our platform. One of our success stories. Damien smiled. That's got to feel full circle. It does. She took the tea, sipping it quietly. Then, after a long pause, she said, I'm thinking of starting something new. Another business? No, she said. A foundation. For long-term recovery. Not just finances, but confidence. Voice. Purpose. Damien grinned. You never stop, do you? I stopped once, she replied. That's how they got in. A month later, Liana flew to New York to appear on a national talk show. As she sat under the bright lights, across from a host wearing a designer blazer and a too-wide smile, the camera zoomed in. And joining us now is the woman behind one of the fastest-growing platforms for financial healing in the U.S., the host announced. Her book hit #1. Her foundation has helped over 10,000 women. And it all started with betrayal. Liana smiled politely. Yes, she said. But more importantly, it started with silence. And ended with me saying no more. The audience applauded. Tell us, the host leaned forward. What would you say to the woman who's watching this right now, crying at her desk, unsure how she'll ever get her life back? Liana didn't hesitate. I'd tell her this. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not alone. You're just carrying a bill that doesn't belong to you. Set it down. And start keeping your receipts. The moment that clip aired, the internet lit up like wildfire. TikTok stitched her line. You're just carrying a bill that doesn't belong to you. Into thousands of videos. Instagram turned it into a carousel quote, tagged by influencers, therapists, and financial coaches. The hashtag keep the receipt trended for 3 days straight. But more than that, it started conversations in living rooms, break rooms, and quiet corners of crowded apartments. Women who had never heard the term financial betrayal were suddenly naming it. And naming it meant stopping it. Liana never wanted fame. She wanted impact. And now she had it. But with light comes shadow. Rosa returned. This time, not with a call or an insult, but with a lawsuit. Defamation. Filed through a third-rate lawyer, Rosa claimed the success of the receipt had come at the expense of her family reputation and emotional safety. Liana's legal team laughed. Damien, ever composed, called it desperation disguised as dignity. But Liana didn't laugh. Not because she was afraid. Because she understood exactly what was happening. Rosa had lost control. The smear tactics hadn't worked. The manipulation had fizzled. And now, she wanted to punish Liana for walking away and for winning. So Liana did what she always did when chaos knocked. She sat quietly. She reviewed the documents. She made tea. And then she went on the offensive. In a press release posted to the receipts site the next day, Liana made no personal attacks. No names. Just facts. She wrote, "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is speak the truth, especially when that truth unmasks someone else's comfort. We are not in the business of humiliation. We are in the business of liberation. And no one sues silence unless it's finally being heard." The statement went viral. Within hours, hundreds of women began sharing their own stories using the hashtag they tried to sue me too. It became more than a trend. It became a reckoning. The lawsuit collapsed before it reached court. Rose's attorney withdrew after discovering that the damage claim was based on private family group chats and speculative job interviews Rosa never attended. But the aftermath left a sour taste. Because the pain wasn't over. Not completely. One morning, Liana found herself scrolling through an old folder in her email, one she hadn't touched since the early days with Daniel. Photos. A trip to Puerto Rico. A Christmas where they wore matching pajamas. A voicemail where he drunkenly told her, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." She sat back in her chair, the ache dull but insistent. Healing wasn't a straight line. Sometimes it looped. Sometimes it stabbed in the quiet. She didn't miss him. She missed who she thought he was. And that, she realized, was a different kind of grief. Later that day, she went for a walk. No phone. No distractions. Just the wind and the sound of her own feet on pavement. And she thought about the women who still hadn't left. The ones making excuses for their partner's debt, for their brother's failed businesses, for their mother's-in-law's cruelty. The women who still said, "I can't just walk away." That night, she wrote her second book's title down in a notebook. Exit Strategy: How to Leave Before You Lose Everything. She circled it twice. And just below it wrote, "Sometimes the hardest thing to do is leave when you're still the one holding everyone together." As the receipt expanded into podcasts, workshops, and financial recovery kits, Liana remained careful about one thing: privacy. She never released Daniel's full name. Never posted photos. Never shared voice messages. She didn't need to, because her story was not about vengeance. It was about agency. Still, that didn't stop Daniel from reaching out one last time. It happened on a humid Sunday evening. Her assistant forwarded the email without comment. Subject: Closure. It was long, wordy, rambling. Daniel apologized again. Said he'd lost everything. Said his mom had turned on him. Too. Said the lounge was shut down. The debts piled high. Said he missed the version of himself that existed when he was with her. But he didn't ask for money. Or forgiveness. He just asked for recognition. For a moment of humanity. Liana read it twice. And then she replied with 2 sentences. "I hope you find the healing you never gave me. But you will never again have access to the life you abandoned." She hit send. Then archived the entire conversation. 2 weeks later, she held the first receipt recovery retreat. It wasn't glamorous. Just 30 women, a lake house, and long, raw conversations. Some cried. Some yelled. Some stared at the fire and whispered things they hadn't said in 20 years. And Liana listened. She taught. She gave worksheets. She gave permission. And on the final night, she stood barefoot by the water and said, "If you gave everything and still got left, that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you generous. And if you learn from it, it makes you powerful." The women stood one by one, each carrying a stone, each naming what they were letting go of. Debt, regret, self-blame, him. They threw them into the lake and watched the ripples stretch wider than they'd imagined. Later that evening, sitting by herself, Liana looked up at the stars. She wasn't rich by old standards, not yachts and diamonds. But she was wealthy. In time, in wisdom, in peace. And for the first time in years, she thought of her future and smiled. Because she didn't need someone beside her to feel full. She was the someone she had always been waiting for. Liana Torres was now a household name, but not in the way celebrities were. She wasn't chased by paparazzi or trending for her outfits. She was famous in living rooms, quiet bedrooms, and broken kitchen tables. In whispered conversations between sisters. In support groups where women clutched their bank statements with shaking hands. In corners of the internet where courage was just beginning to grow. Because Liana had done something rare. She didn't just escape the fire. She mapped the exits for everyone still burning. Exit Strategy, her second book, was rawer than the first. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about before the betrayal. The warning signs people miss. The small gut feelings we suppress. The questions we're afraid to ask because we don't want the answers. She wrote, "If someone only loves you when you're useful, they don't love you. They love your function. They love your silence. They love the way you bend." The book topped bestseller lists within days. With the foundation now operating in 5 states and 2 countries, Liana barely had time to reflect. Her calendar was packed. Speaking events, board meetings, podcast recordings, mentorship sessions. But one request made her pause. A private school in California reached out. All-girls campus. Ages 14 to 18. They wanted her to speak at graduation. "Why me?" she asked the headmaster on the call. "Because these girls are taught to be perfect," the woman said. "Not powerful. And I want them to meet a woman who stopped apologizing." Liana agreed. On the day of the event, she stood before a sea of teenagers in caps and gowns. Some smiled, some whispered, some scrolled on their phones. But Liana wasn't intimidated. She looked at them the way she once looked at herself. Young. Hopeful. Unsure of what she was allowed to demand. She began. "One day, someone will call you too much, too loud, too smart, too strong. That's the day you've made someone uncomfortable with your clarity. Don't shrink to make them feel safe." Silence. Then applause. And afterward, one girl hugged her so tightly she whispered, "I didn't know I was allowed to take up space." That night, alone in her hotel suite, Liana opened her journal. She hadn't written in it since the first launch of the receipt. She flipped back to the page where she had written the number. $80,437.17. At the time, it was the number that broke her. Now, it was just a beginning. She did the math. Since launching her first platform, her companies and foundations had raised and distributed over $4.2 million in grants, education, and direct financial recovery programs for women. She wrote underneath the number, "Debt cleared. Legacy built." Then she shut the journal. But just when she thought the past had no more cards to play, she got a knock at her office door. "Miss Torres," her assistant said, peeking in, "there's someone here asking for a few minutes. He doesn't have an appointment. I'm booked. He says he's Daniel's father." Liana froze. Not once had she heard from him. Not during the debt. Not after the departure. Not even when the lawsuits flew. "Send him in," she said quietly. The man walked in slowly, hat in hand. Older now. Paler. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had watched more than he'd ever said aloud. "Miss Torres," he said, "thank you for seeing me." Liana nodded. "What can I help you with?" He didn't sit. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "For what my son did. For what my wife said. For what I didn't stop." Liana watched him. "I knew what Rosa was doing," he admitted. "I saw it. I heard it. And I stayed quiet. I thought I was protecting the family by letting her handle things. But now I see all I did was stand by while a good woman got hurt." Liana's throat tightened, not with emotion for him, but with the grief of all the years that could have been different. "I appreciate you coming," she said, "but I don't need your apology." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here. Because you deserve one anyway." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small package. "A key." Liana frowned. "That's for the Rivera family cabin," he explained. "In the mountains. You always said you wanted to visit, but never had the time. Rosa made sure you never did. I'm giving it to you." "I don't need." "I'm not giving it out of guilt," he interrupted. "I'm giving it because for the first time in years, I'm doing what I believe is right, not what Rosa tells me." He placed the key on her desk. Then he left. No drama. No theatrics. Just quiet. Liana stared at the key. And then smiled. Not because she wanted the cabin, but because for the first time, someone from that family did something without strings. A few days later, she took a short trip. Alone. Just her, the key, and a weekend bag. She drove up to the cabin on a Friday evening. It was modest, old wood, a slanted porch, the smell of pine and dust. But it was peaceful, removed from noise. Still. That night, she built a fire, sat with tea, and for the first time in over a year, opened the old photo album. Not to mourn, but to release. On the final page of the album, she slid in a new picture. Her standing in front of a room full of women holding their own receipts, a symbolic photo from one of her recent workshops. She wrote beneath it, "This is what healing looks like. Not burning bridges. Not revenge. But building a life so honest, it makes every lie disappear." And as the fire crackled, Liana looked out the window at the stars. They didn't care who she used to be, only who she had become. And that was more than enough. The cabin became something sacred. Liana didn't talk about it on podcasts. She didn't post photos of it on Instagram. It wasn't for content. It wasn't for strategy. It was for her. Every few months, she'd retreat there alone, a place to think, to unhook from the world, to be no one's leader, no one's inspiration. Just a woman who once lost everything and somehow still stood. But during one trip that autumn, something shifted. She sat on the creaking porch, blanket around her shoulders, watching golden leaves fall like confetti across the mossy front yard. Her tea had gone cold in her hands. Her mind was elsewhere. For the first time in a long time, she felt it. Loneliness. Not the aching, desperate kind. Not the kind that begs to be filled by someone who doesn't deserve you. But the kind that whispers, "You've built an empire. Is there still room for softness?" The next day, while checking her email, she noticed a message flagged as important. It wasn't from her team. It was from Camila, Daniel's daughter. Subject, update. "I thought you should know." The email was short. "He came to find me. He said he's sorry. I told him I'm not ready to have him in my life. But I also told him I'm doing fine. Thanks to you. I started my first job last month. I'm renting my own place. I bought a secondhand car. I'm okay. You don't owe me anything. But I just wanted to say, I'm standing because you did. Camila." Liana closed the laptop and wept. Not because of Daniel. Not because of regret. But because it was possible, real. Healing transformation was possible, even from the ashes of betrayal. And she had been a bridge to that. Back in the city, exit strategy was being translated into 5 new languages. Requests came in for a documentary, a short series, a university lecture tour. But one proposal stood out. A message from a filmmaker named Tessa Ng, known for her quiet, award-winning pieces that didn't exploit stories, but honored them. "I want to tell this story the right way. Not as a revenge arc, but as a blueprint. Not about a man leaving a woman, but about a woman refusing to leave herself." Liana met with her over tea. They talked for hours, not about casting or camera angles, but about dignity, control, boundaries. Liana set one rule. No dramatizing the pain. Tell the truth. Show the rise. Tessa agreed. The film was titled simply, The Receipt. When it premiered at a small film festival in Vermont, Liana sat in the back row, hoodie over her head, sunglasses on, trying not to be recognized. But she was. Not by critics. By women in the audience who walked up afterward and said things like, "That was me. I thought I was alone. You gave words to my silence." That night, walking back to her hotel, Liana smiled under the moonlight. The woman who once had to justify every penny she spent now had women offering her their stories like treasure. Then came the letter. Not an email. A real letter. Postmarked. Folded. Torn slightly at the edges. From Rosa. Inside was a single page handwritten. "You won. I don't know what else to say. I don't recognize my son anymore. I don't recognize myself either. You were never weak. You were simply better. I can't undo what I said. Or how I laughed. But I see it now. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted to say you were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Rosa." Liana stared at the paper. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breath didn't quicken. She folded it once, placed it in the back of her journal, and said aloud, to no one but herself, "That's not for me. That's for her." Because healing, real healing, doesn't demand you let people back in. It just releases the weight of holding them out. By year's end, the Receipt Foundation was working with shelters, financial aid offices, and even probation programs, helping women leave cycles they never knew they were trapped in. One winter, at a donor event, a woman approached Liana holding a framed piece of paper. It was her own receipt, a printout of her final student loan payment. "I read your book during my divorce," she said. "You helped me track every dollar he drained. I fought back. This is my first real financial win, and I wanted to give you a copy." Liana held the paper with reverence, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm not your savior," she said gently. "No," the woman replied. "You're my proof." In private moments, Liana sometimes thought of Daniel. Not with anger, not even with pity, just as a detail, a name that had faded into a larger picture. One night, while speaking at a panel on economic abuse, she was asked by a young journalist, "What would you say to him now if you had to say just one thing?" Liana didn't hesitate. "Thank you," she said, "because you broke me in the exact place I needed to grow." The last scene of the film showed her at the lake from the retreat. Not polished. No makeup. Hair messy from the wind. She stood by the water and dropped a final stone, the one she said she'd kept for herself. "I forgave you long before you said sorry," she whispered. And then she walked away. Not dramatically, just calmly, back toward the life she built with her own hands. Interest included. The gala was elegant, understated, and held in a sunlit art museum that overlooked the river. It was the 3-year anniversary of the Receipt Foundation, and Liana Torres stood near the balcony in a fitted black dress, a single gold chain at her throat, watching the crowd below as they drifted from paintings to conversation. Donors, board members, survivors, community leaders, all mingling under soft jazz and champagne. There were no fireworks, no giant checks, but the walls held stories. Portraits of women who'd rebuilt. Quotes etched in gold on the gallery glass. "She paid for everyone. Now she's paid back." It wasn't her debt, but it was her power. They used her silence. She turned it into strategy. A woman approached Liana, sharp suit, gray hair, calm voice. "Miss Torres," she said, extending her hand. "I'm the dean of Northridge Law School. We'd like to create a scholarship in your name for women escaping financial abuse." Liana blinked. A scholarship. In her name. The girl who once clipped coupons while covering her husband's family's mess. She smiled, shook the woman's hand. "I'd be honored," she said. And she meant it. After the crowd dispersed, Liana stepped outside alone, heels clicking softly on the cobblestone path along the river. The night was cool, and she welcomed the silence. Damien, now her COO and still one of her closest friends, caught up with her moments later, handing her a shawl. "You disappear at your own party," he teased. "I like quiet more than applause," she said. He nodded, standing beside her. "I was thinking," he began, "maybe next year you finally take that vacation." She smirked. "What's that?" "A thing normal people do. It involves hammocks. No spreadsheets." She laughed, really laughed, for the first time that day. "I might consider it." He handed her an envelope. "Before I forget, a donor asked to stay anonymous. But they wanted you to have this." She opened it. Inside was a photo. It was of the Rivera cabin, the one she used to visit alone. And in front of it, Camila, smiling, standing strong, holding up the sign that read, "This is where I learned to start over." On the back, written in black ink, "You gave me the key. I opened more than a door." Liana held the photo close to her chest. And for a moment, she allowed herself to feel it all. The betrayal, the debt, the empty apartment, the burning coffee, the laughter, the insult, the silence, the rise. Weeks later, she was asked to give a TED Talk. She declined. Twice. But the third time, she said yes, not for the platform, but for the message. She stepped onto that red, wearing the same navy pantsuit she wore the day Daniel left. Not because she needed to prove anything, because she had outgrown the need to dress for anyone's expectations but her own. She opened with a sentence that stunned the audience. My mother-in-law once said, "Now that you're broke, let's see who wants you." So I built something no one could take. Then she told them everything. Not as tragedy, as blueprint. That video became the most watched talk of the year. Universities played it in ethics and finance classes. Victims of domestic financial manipulation cited it in legal proceedings. Lawmakers even began drafting new bills, naming economic coercion as a form of abuse. And still, Liana stayed grounded. No agents. No memoir deals. She taught workshops. She mentored. She answered DMs when she could. And one evening, while hosting a panel in Austin, she saw someone in the back row who made her freeze. Daniel, older now, slumped posture, clean but hollow-eyed. He didn't approach her afterward, didn't speak, just watched, then left. She didn't chase, didn't need to. She had spoken her truth. And this time, he was the silent one. Liana bought a small piece of land near the cabin, a field with a view of the water and space for 10 retreat cottages. She called it Still Ground. A place for women to land, not to escape, but to begin. There, she hosted the most transformative retreats yet. Not just financial recovery, emotional sovereignty, self-trust, boundary setting, and quiet celebration. Because some victories don't look like fireworks. They look like making dinner alone in peace. Like seeing your own name on a lease. Like knowing no one's name is on your healing but yours. At the final retreat of the year, she asked each woman to write one sentence on a piece of driftwood and toss it into the lake. What did you lose? The answers were raw. I lost my ability to dream. I lost 10 years and all my savings. I lost myself. Then she asked, what did you gain? And the answers changed. I gained my own voice. I gained peace. I gained me. And Liana? She wrote, I lost my silence. I gained my story. Back at the cabin, she kept a journal, but not the old kind. This one didn't track debt or pain. This one documented joy. Wins. Moments no one clapped for, but mattered anyway. Walked through a store and didn't compare prices. Said no, without explaining why. Woke up and didn't feel like I was bracing for something. And her favorite. Didn't think of him once today. Liana never remarried. Not because she couldn't, but because she'd built a life so complete, love would need to arrive ready. Not as a project, not as a fixer-upper, but as a partner. She didn't need a savior. She had become the woman she once prayed someone else would be. And when people asked years later, how did it all start? She would smile, not bitterly, but knowingly, and say, it started with $80,000, a goodbye I didn't deserve, and a laugh I'll never forget. But what came after was all mine.